Friendly greetings. This is Torley Linden. I'm delighted you could join me on this fine, as we can see here, spring day, because that's exactly what I'm going to show you. Some spring cleaning tips for your Second Life inventory. So first of all, you may be wondering, why would I need to spring clean? Why is it important? Well, a smaller inventory not only loads faster, but you can find your stuff easier. And plus, it just feels wonderful to get rid of all the clutter. You can easily find out your total inventory item count. You've probably done an inventory filter or search before. Just click here, and if you type anything on the top, it just fetches all your items. And then it'll eventually settle down with a total count. Do note this isn't a true exact count, because it includes your library, which is actually technically not yours. This is just stock content provided by Linden Lab, and there is a way to hide it. But nonetheless, that's a good rough target count. Nonetheless, one of the things I highly recommend that you do is that you create, of course, your specific system has to work for you, but you can create a temporary folder to shuttle things you're not sure of into. Because as you peruse your inventory, there's going to be things that you recognize. Notice right here, this is my temporary folder. It consists mainly of things that I got recently, things I haven't rezzed yet. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to throw them out, but I know they're in here so that if it comes to having a few moments of spare time, I can go through there and make sense of it. And in the meantime, across my journeys, if I get stuff I'm not sure what that is, I can just chuck them in there. And like I said, your specific method may vary. You can create an overall temporary folder. If you just right click here and say new folder on the top level of your inventory, you can just call that temp, or you can make it look fancified, whatever, temp, like that, as long as it works for you. Or you can create temporary folders within a specific item type folder. Now, what I'm going to show you is how to go through your temp folder. So we'll use my example, and I've just teleported, I'll explain this in a little bit, to my own land. It helps to have your own land. You can do this in a public sandbox though, or anywhere where the objects, you can res them and you're not going to clutter it up and make someone else angry. So shared public spaces are a good one if you don't have your own land. Let me show you. So let's go back into my temp folder. And I will often begin by starting to res things. Like in the case, I'll just start from the top here. You can go through folders of nested stuff separately, but in this simple example, I'll just click and drag, and eventually you end up with boxes. Try not to have them overlap too much. Otherwise, it gets to be a problem. And sometimes you'll get prompts. I just ignore those as I'm just seeing what's going on that I want to check out of interest. Very timely things that are happening in the world. And here we have some items, for instance. So as I look through this, also be careful, because these are all the things I rezzed, they are copyable. So they'll leave copies behind in inventory, which means if I right click and were to hit the delete key and remove it from inworld, it's still in there. However, if something is no copy, then if I res it, that it will disappear from my inventory. So if you want to keep those things, you have to bring them back, and do be prepared, kind of like your own yard sale, for some clutter. So if I want to keep this, I right click and I do take this back. The strength of this, of course, is you can see with your objects, everything as it's fully res. In the case of boxes, you may need to right click and unpack them, but at least you go through it as a batch. And yes, it does help to have nice music to put you in the mood. And why I also have this out here, this is actually, let me just close that back, full bright, neutral lighting, this white platform. It just makes it great if you have a sky box even. That's very clean, so you can see anything. You can see the tiniest objects out there. You can make one of these thingies if you right click and say build, like this. I'll just show you very quick and easy, and click on the ground. It starts off with the plywood, right? I'm going to hold down the Alt key and zoom in like that. And now I have to get rid of that. That's annoying me. I just minimized that. Pardon. So let's go to the texture tab, and in texture here, let's click this and choose blank. Now notice it isn't full bright yet. What you want to do is not only make it full bright, so now it's going to be white on white object, and you can make this 10 by 10 Or I know some of you like to play with mega prims. That's an option as well. And so here we have a neutral white platform, and that is how to do that. Remember that in the course of your Second Life travels, you may have some stuff in your lost and found folder. You can just pop that open, and if you're sure you want to delete it all, you can right click it, empty lost and found. That is permanent. Same thing as your trash if you were to right click and empty your trash. So they're separate folders but behave similarly. Now I'm going to show you, since we've gone through our objects, of course, you know what to take. If you take it back in your inventory, you can sort it into another folder. Now, I don't need to go through that with you at this stage, but I would like to show you some tricks for opening other sorts of inventory items. So textures is a very fine example. Say you have several textures right here, and you don't want to keep double click, right? Because it becomes very repetitive. Instead, what you can do is click one, hold shift, and then click at the end of a given range like that, right click and open. They will open now in a single window, which you can resize. And this can be done with various other item types. And then here you can click, and then you can preview that just within. If you want to close the whole batch, there's the master window right there. So that can make it faster for texture browsing or browsing other items, and it saves you clicks opening each one up individually. Let us, not to be confused with the vegetable, let's move on to eliminating useless redundancy by deleting the duplicates. It may be a common thing in your inventory. If you build, especially, you have a lot of objects called object, but they're not necessarily all the same. Again, you should res them in world. And another thing is that landmarks in particular, if you go to world menu and world map, unfortunately, the My Landmarks dropdown is not diligent enough, not clever enough to detect and remove duplicates. So you end up with a lot of cases where it's like, my gosh, I've bought a bunch of things from this store, in every single folder, it's a landmark. That could be handy to get back there, but there's no need for all those duplicates. But landmarks, I wouldn't worry too much about unless you have a tremendous amount. Like, for example, let me search here. I wish I could do that right C hole. And then we can see all these duplicate landmarks. And remember, right here, the gear, there are hidden options like filters. If we want to limit this to just landmarks, we'll just show none. And then we'll click landmarks here, and it'll show just the ones with the match here that I filtered for, the C hole keyword, in the name. And then you can, of course, right click and delete them, or you can control delete them. Just hold control like that, click multiple ones like that, hit the delete key, or right click and delete. Now let me tell you about the fable of cube stuffing. Cube stuffing, as it's colloquially known, is when you res a cube. It doesn't necessarily have to be a strict cube, it's just an expression. But it's a container object because every object can contain stuff. Let me show you, or just right click and build and click. And here we have a standard plywood cube, yes? So what will we do with that now? We will go to the content tab, and we will start to drag things into the contents here that we are not sure that we'd ever really use them, but we are concerned that we don't want to delete them permanently. So we just archive them, we pack them into a box like that. And I think that's a simple idea. You can put any sorts of inventory items into there. So for example, if I wanted to drag a note card, I just click and drag. Alrighty. And it ends up in here. And you can do the shift select thing that I showed you earlier. If I had a bunch of things that I want to bring, well, not in that folder. How about some textures, for instance, like these? And then also remember, because if it's copyable, it'll be left behind here. And you want to right click and delete it after you're sure it's been preserved. Otherwise, no, you don't want to do that. So as this process continues, you may end up with, say, hundreds of items in here. It does get very, very slow to load. So be very, very careful of that. Be very careful to label it and even a description of the contents, or even put that in the name, since description doesn't appear readily in your inventory unless you right click in properties and see it there like that. And then what you can do with the cube after it's being well stuffed, so I'll just call this stuff cube for now, but you should use better care with your name, is you right click and you take that back in and you can archive that. Or another option some residents prefer is on stable land, meaning it's not going to be returned. It's just to leave it out there on the land, kind of like a barrel full of goods. In this case, it was copyable. So, but the chances are you will put stuff in it that's not copyable. So remember that distinction, that if something is not copyable, that the cube will leave your inventory because of its contents. It's the most restrictive permissions within this, but you get the notion right there. Finally, after all has been said and done, but hopefully more has been done. Now is the time to empty our trash. Be certain though, be reassured that you've checked everything, nothing, because it's permanent, nothing that you want to keep is in there. And watch your inventory total count. This kind of ties it all in a loop. We come full circle, right click, empty trash, and it'll give you a confirmation the first time. And let's do it. And watch as that count goes down with a deep breath. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Yes. So here's to wishing you a happy, healthy inventory in your second life. Have a marvelous, splendiferous time with your spring cleaning.